by Canada. We begin hour 3 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show with the National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump, Ambassador Robert C. O'Brien, longtime friend of mine, as I always disclose. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. Congratulations on being there yesterday and being a part of a major pivot point, as Benjamin Netanyahu called it, in the history of Middle East peace.
Thanks for having me on, Hugh. And it was really a day that I think demonstrated courage and highlighted the courage of King Hamad, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, and the leadership of Donald J. Trump to bring them all together to reach this incredible deal.
Now, I will come back to the deal in a moment. I want to go to something the president said yesterday and set it up this way. 3 days ago, Politico reported that Iran has threatened our ambassador to South Africa. 2 days ago, Admiral Stavridis said on this show that if they did so, the response ought to be immediate and massive. Last hour, our friend Congressman Gallagher said immediate, massive, and disproportionate. Yesterday, the president said, we're all set. If they do this, quote, they'll be hit 1,000 times harder. What's the message to the mullahs, Robert O'Brien?
Well, the message to the mullahs is don't make that mistake. And if you do, there will be a severe and decisive response. Alana Marks, a great ambassador to South Africa. She's a friend of the president, but this would apply to a friend of mine. But this would apply to any ambassador, not just Ambassador Marks. So, the days of state-sponsored terrorism by Iran are over, and if they engage in that kind of behavior, the consequences would be massive.
I also believe that should apply to any American walking the street of any country in the world. If we connect Iran, that it ought to be immediate, massive, and disproportionate, and not just under President Donald J. Trump, whether it's for another 5 years or for another year. Do you believe future administrations will adopt the same policy vis-a-vis people who are in Team Trump right now who made peace yesterday?
Well, I hope they do. Look, the peace through strength works. It always has. It did from Roman times on. Ronald Reagan brought it back into fashion here. And President Trump, after 8 years of leading from behind and defense sequestration of Obama Biden, brought back peace through strength. And these are the fruits of it. The deal that we have in the Middle East was built on political capital. So President Trump created political capital by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which everyone's, the foreign policy establishment tore their hair out, and it was going to lead to war and that sort of thing. He recognized the Golan Heights. Again, that was another terrible moment for the foreign policy establishment. It was going to create chaos in the Middle East. On the Gulf Arab side, he sold them arms that they needed to defend themselves against Iran. He deployed Patriot missiles there. He pulled out of the disastrous JCPOA, which was just rank appeasement, and he built capital with the Gulf Arabs. But then he did something that was very unusual for politicians and presidents. He spent the political capital in Israel and in the Gulf states. He used that capital to get both sides to make tough decisions and make peace, and that's how you do a deal. And I think it's a case study. It should be a Harvard Business School case study or a Georgetown Foreign Service School of Foreign Service case study for anyone who wants to know how to make an international deal. You build the political capital, you build the credibility and trust with the parties, and then you use the capital to get the deal done. And it's very impressive what the president did over the last 3 years.
Now, Ambassador O'Brien, I played a couple of times today a montage that the Washington Free Beacon has assembled of that very national security establishment you just referenced, of course, quarterbacked by John Kerry, but featuring all sorts of talking heads on TV, all of them wrong about the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, all of them wrong about annexation, predicting violence, the destruction of peace initiatives, the end of the world, in essence. If the foreign policy establishment were like the Professional Golfers Association, all of those talking heads and former officials would lose their card. They wouldn't be allowed to play. Instead of being confronted with their woes and cries of doom, they're back talking about this deal and, in fact, ignoring this deal that was done yesterday when Netanyahu calls it a pivot for peace. Should anyone pay attention to them at this point? They are so discredited.
No, and look, I think what you have is, you had the outsiders come in, and although look, there are a lot of folks on the team. It's a highly accomplished team of Mark Meadows and Mike Pompeo and Gina Haspel and John Radcliffe. I mean, these are varsity players who came in and showed how to execute the plays and quarterbacked by Donald Trump. But there's nothing worse for the out of party power, the out of power party, and I include a lot of the so-called Republicans in there who have just been wrong time and time and time again on foreign policy issues. To watch how it should be done, and again, the folks, the foreign policy folks that love what's happening are the former Reagan era officials, and you're going to see a number of them come out and endorse President Trump in the next several days because they recognize the Gipper. It's a little bit of a different style, but they recognize Ronald Reagan and what Donald Trump is doing, and just like Reagan, he's kept us out of wars. I mean, remember Ronald Reagan, other than Grenada, which was really more of a massive hostage rescue of the medical students. He's kept us out of wars the same way Ronald Reagan kept us out of wars by smart diplomacy and hard power and soft power combined to get wins for the United States.
Now, Ambassador O'Brien, the president hinted strongly yesterday that more Sunni countries will be joining this new pact for peace in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia. How imminent is another addition to the Abraham Accord?
Well, look, we're talking to a number of folks. The president's been talking to leaders in the region on a regular basis, and you see those readouts in the White House statements, so people can start, drawing their own conclusions from the foreign heads of state with whom he's speaking, and with whom Secretary Pompeo and Jared and I and others are talking with on a regular basis. These deals are all very complicated and hard. There are folks out of power folks who want to look at it and say, well, this is easy. He just formalized things that have been happening for years. Well, if it was so easy, they would have gotten the deal done. They're tough deals. They're complex negotiations. Even though we have a lot of momentum, it's tough sledding. It takes a lot of investing in personal relationships and figuring out how to match up the Israelis with their counterparts. And we're doing that on a daily basis. So I think we're going to have more success, as the president pointed out. But we don't have a timeline on this. There's no election timeline. It's just trying to get great deals for our Arab friends and our Israeli friends and putting them together and making sure that we have a warm peace. The idea isn't just to get someone to sign a scrap of paper to press folks into something that they really don't want to do. The idea is to make sure that these are deals that are where the parties are willing and want to have a warm peace, as the UAE has been calling this, instead of just a cold peace. So we want to make sure that when the time is right for a deal, it gets done, and that the deal endures and helps folks on both sides for generations.
Let me close by asking you about Bob Woodward's book. I have repeatedly played the tape of you on this show in late January, declaring to the country, and the transcript was posted and the audio is available, in late January, that the virus was deadly and it was dangerous. The president was being briefed on an almost hour-by-hour basis. You were in all the meetings. The media has attempted to turn the Woodward tape into the storyline that the president misled the public. Well, you were out a week before that interview telling everyone it was dangerous and deadly. You were in the room when he closed the incoming flights from China. Did he do anything to mislead the American public, in your view, or did he walk the line correctly?
No, at every turn, the president made the right decision, and oftentimes those decisions were made in the face of real opposition from advisors who were concerned about the economy and the effect of the travel ban, whether it was China or Europe. He stood up the industrial base to manufacture vaccines, therapeutics, ventilators. In that critical month of February, he bought us a month of time with the travel bans to get the industrial base up and running in a way that it hasn't been done and converted since World War II. But look, at the time that the president made the comments in early February, and I made some, I said something very similar after having warned the president and being concerned, having been on your show on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. At the time, we only had 8 cases in the U.S. and no deaths. And I said that at that time, and the president said the same thing, there's no risk or very little risk, and people shouldn't panic. And we felt that the steps the president had taken and was taking at the time would mitigate the risk that we weren't warned about. What none of us understood, fully at the time, is how resilient this virus was, and how difficult it could be, especially for the elderly and those in nursing homes. And we learned that, unfortunately, it was China that didn't disclose the information they had early on. They didn't give us virus samples. They didn't allow our doctors into China. And so we had to learn through a lot of things we could have learned if China had been open and transparent through tough experience. But look, I still don't think there's ever a reason to panic. I mean, could you imagine during the Blitz if Winston Churchill had gone out to the people of London and said, "It's time to panic. The risk is high. Let's, uh, you know, run for the hills." I mean, that's not what a leader does. What a leader does is what President Trump did. He buckled down and he did everything necessary to make sure that every American had a ventilator if they needed one. I mean, you remember at the time people were saying, "Hey, Grandpa's going to get a ventilator, and they're going to have to take him off it and give it to his grandson," in an ethics hearing. So that never happened because of what President Trump did.
Robert O'Brien, Ambassador, National Security Advisor, thank you for joining me. Congratulations on being in the front row yesterday at a deal that you helped negotiate, helped Donald Trump bring home between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, between Bahrain and Israel.